Frank Fritz was once the heart and soul of American pickers, a man who could turn rust into treasure and make forgotten corners of the country feel like home. For over a decade, viewers followed him as he scoured barns, attics, and backroads, uncovering relics from the past. But his real gift wasn't just in spotting antiques, it was in connecting with the stories behind them. Frank brought warmth, authenticity, and a touch of humanity to the show. His bond with co-host Mike Wolfe felt like brotherhood, filled with friendship, rivalry, and mutual respect. Together, they didn't just find forgotten items, they created unforgettable television. Then, in 2020, Frank disappeared. No goodbye, no statement, just silence. As new episodes aired without him, fans were left with questions. Was he sick? Was he fired? Had something gone wrong behind the scenes? Speculation ran wild, but the truth remained hidden behind legal documents and sealed agreements. For years, Frank became a mystery, ironically, like the forgotten items he once recovered. In reality, Frank was quietly battling severe health issues. He had long lived with Crohn's disease, a painful autoimmune condition that left him in constant discomfort. While he appeared energetic on screen, he often suffered in silence. In 2019, things worsened after he underwent major back surgery. The procedure led to complications, aggravated by his chronic illness. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, weight loss, fatigue, and physical decline made everyday life a struggle. Publicly, his absence was unexplained, but privately, he was fading from the life he once loved. Then, tragedy struck. On July 14, 2022, Frank suffered a massive stroke at his home in Iowa. It was sudden and devastating. Though paramedics responded quickly and saved his life, the damage was profound. He was left partially paralyzed, with impaired speech and mobility. The man known for his vibrant personality and storytelling charm was now locked in a body that no longer obeyed him. Now in 2025, the curtain has finally lifted on Frank's mysterious departure. It wasn't scandal or conflict, it was a private battle with illness, pain, and ultimately, survival. His story, once hidden, is now one of resilience, loss, and the fragile humanity behind fame. The man who once roamed America's winding backroads in search of forgotten treasures was now confined to a wheelchair, reliant on caregivers for even the most basic tasks. Attempts to engage him in conversation were often met with frustration or silence, his once vibrant personality reduced to a faint echo of its former self. Recognizing the seriousness of his condition, the court swiftly established a conservatorship to manage his medical care and personal affairs. Frank was moved to a specialized stroke rehabilitation facility where top-tier professionals took over his treatment. Despite their best efforts, one heartbreaking truth remained: Frank had lost his independence, the very thing that had once defined him. While those closest to him quietly mourned the change, fans remained largely unaware. The production company offered minimal updates, and there was no public tribute or acknowledgement of Frank's profound impact on the show. His name, once synonymous with curiosity, friendship, and adventure, slowly vanished from public discourse. The industry's silence felt haunting, a stark reminder of how quickly fame can fade when faced with human vulnerability. By 2023, confusion and speculation surrounding Frank's sudden disappearance had reached a peak. Fans of American pickers were left grappling with unanswered questions. Had Frank been fired? Had he fallen out with Mike Wolfe? Why was there no farewell episode, no online update, no closure? While the public speculated, a quieter, more emotional moment was unfolding in private, a heartfelt reunion between Frank and Mike, away from cameras and headlines. This meeting wasn't for show, it happened in an undisclosed location, away from the spotlight. It was raw, deeply personal, and filled with emotion. The two men, once inseparable on screen, shared a fragile reconnection shaped by years of distance, illness, and silence. Tears were shed, memories of their adventures resurfaced, and an honest exchange took place, part reconciliation, part mourning of what had been lost. While it was a beautiful, healing moment, it wasn't a resolution. The pain, the lost time, and Frank's ongoing decline still lingered heavily in the background. The reunion served as a bittersweet pause before reality returned with force. Behind the emotional moment lay a web of mounting medical, legal, and financial challenges that would continue to shape Frank's life, quietly and out of sight. The truth became clear: Frank Fritz would not return to television. His departure was not just from the show but from public life itself. Though Frank's 2022 stroke was initially met with widespread sympathy, few understood the full extent of what he was battling. Beyond the immediate effects, partial paralysis and communication loss, he was also struggling with severe aortic stenosis, a condition that narrows the heart's aortic valve and restricts blood flow. Combined with his other chronic illnesses, it created a complex and grim medical picture. Frank's final chapter was not one of dramatic headlines or scripted farewells. It was a quiet, painful descent into a life far removed from the one fans had known and loved. Frank Fritz's health complications ran far deeper than most realized. One of the most serious conditions he faced was aortic stenosis, a narrowing of the heart's valve that forced his heart to work overtime just to circulate blood. This constant strain drastically increased his risk of heart failure, chronic fatigue, and sudden cardiac events. On top of that, he suffered from cerebrovascular disease, a progressive condition that damaged the brain's blood vessels and raised the likelihood of further strokes and cognitive decline. Frank's brain, already vulnerable from his previous stroke, remained under constant threat. Adding to this already overwhelming medical picture was his long-term struggle with Crohn's disease, an autoimmune disorder that attacked his digestive system, intensified pain and fatigue, and interfered with nutrient absorption. By early 2024, a multidisciplinary team of specialists, including cardiologists, neurologists, and gastroenterologists, came together to manage his care. Their goal wasn't a cure, which was no longer realistic, but to strike a balance between comfort and longevity. Rehabilitation focused on preserving whatever physical function remained. His heart was closely monitored, and his nutrition plan was carefully adjusted to avoid worsening his digestive symptoms. Within this complex care plan, doctors held a fragile hope, aware that, despite medical odds, the human body can sometimes surprise. Yet time was slipping away. What the public didn't see was the quiet legal and logistical machinery operating behind the scenes. Guardianship decisions, financial planning, and treatment approvals became central to how Frank's final months would unfold. His journey was no longer just about health, it was shaped by courtroom rulings and estate management strategies. After his 2022 stroke, Frank was declared medically incapacitated by the state of Iowa. This led to the court appointing a conservator, reportedly a close associate, with full legal control over his finances, medical care, and property. Initially, this conservatorship was intended to protect Frank's interests. However, insiders described a far more complex and troubling reality. The conservatorship quickly expanded into a web of financial managers who held broad authority, often overriding medical decisions in favor of economic ones. One of their most controversial actions was the rapid liquidation of Frank's personal assets to cover skyrocketing medical expenses. According to reports, over 70% of his possessions, including his beloved antique motorcycles, rare signage, and even furniture from his home, were sold off in the first year alone. Financial advisors warned early on that the cost of Frank's care was unsustainable. Internal documents reportedly showed growing concern that the estate's funds would soon be exhausted. In response, the team introduced so-called strategic efficiencies, a term that quickly became a euphemism for deep budget cuts. At this point, critics argue, the conservatorship's priorities shifted away from Frank's well-being towards strict financial control. Medical professionals were reportedly sidelined as financial managers began directing key decisions about his care, decisions that ultimately dictated not just how long he would live, but the quality of that life in his final days. By mid-2024, troubling shifts began to emerge in Frank Fritz's care. What had been a carefully managed rehabilitation plan, including speech therapy, mobility sessions, and scheduled heart procedures, was suddenly dismantled. Vital therapies were cancelled without explanation, and palliative care quietly took their place. Official statements suggested these changes were made to balance care quality with financial constraints, but whispers among insiders, friends, and legal experts hinted at a deeper, more disturbing reality. There were growing allegations that financial decisions were beginning to override medical advice. As Frank's treatments were pulled one by one, questions arose about the true motivations behind the conservatorship's actions. Was the focus still on Frank's well-being, or had the conservatorship become more about cutting costs than preserving life? This tension between compassionate care and fiduciary duty cast a somber shadow over Frank's final chapter, leaving many to wonder who was really making the decisions during his decline. By August 2024, Frank's condition was considered severe but stable. His team had maintained a structured routine aimed at keeping him comfortable and functional. Reports from caregivers described small but meaningful improvements, his responsiveness during therapy, fewer medical complications, and a slight sense of emotional presence. There was hope, however faint, that his decline had plateaued. But that hope was abruptly extinguished. Without warning, his therapies were halted. Mobility aids stopped arriving, scheduled heart procedures were scrapped, and rehabilitation gave way to end-of-life hospice care. No medical emergency had prompted this shift, doctors reportedly had not advised stopping treatment. Instead, according to those close to the estate, the decision came from the conservatorship's financial administrator, the person with final authority over all expenses. Internal documents allegedly revealed that Frank's treatments were deemed too costly, especially given their uncertain outcomes. It marked a quiet but devastating turning point. The impact was immediate. Without movement assistance, Frank became fully bedbound. Without speech therapy, his limited communication abilities regressed. His pre-existing conditions worsened in the absence of monitoring. His estate, once filled with valuable antiques, motorcycles, and cherished memorabilia, had already been heavily liquidated to fund round-the-clock care. Even his Iowa property was reportedly placed under lien. When new costs emerged in August, financial officers allegedly chose to stop active treatment altogether, labeling it a budgetary necessity rather than a medical decision. To outsiders, it may have seemed like the natural course of a deteriorating illness. But to those close to Frank, the timing was suspicious. Why end therapy after months of progress? Why abandon a working care plan just as it showed results? No one had a definitive answer, at least not publicly. Then came September 30, 2024. Frank Fritz passed away from complications related to his stroke. And only after his death did a clearer picture begin to emerge. His estate entered probate, and buried in the legal filings was a clause, one that would finally reveal just how deeply finances had shaped the final days of a man once known for bringing forgotten treasures to light. During the routine legal process of settling Frank Fritz's estate after his death, a shocking discovery reportedly came to light, an obscure clause buried in his original contract with the American Pickers production company. According to those familiar with the matter, the clause stated that if Frank remained medically incapacitated for 24 consecutive months, all rights to future residuals, including royalties, merchandise profits, and syndication income, would revert back to the production company. In essence, if Frank lived past October 11, 2024, his estate would continue receiving substantial payments. But if he passed away or remained incapacitated before that date, those earnings would be forfeited. Frank suffered his stroke in mid-July 2022. His death on September 30, 2024, just 11 days before the contract deadline, meant his estate lost the right to future income. Estate documents and internal communications allegedly revealed that a legal review of this clause took place only weeks before his therapy was halted. Memos reviewed by sources referenced the reversion threshold, warning of financial risk if Frank survived beyond the contract's deadline. Suddenly, the withdrawal of care, speech therapy, mobility assistance, and critical heart procedures no longer appeared to be solely based on medical considerations. Insiders now believe these decisions may have been influenced by financial strategy. While there is no hard evidence that anyone intentionally hastened Frank's death, the timing raised deep ethical concerns. If he had survived just 12 more days, his estate could have received millions in future earnings. Instead, those rights legally reverted to the network. To some, the sequence of events appears too precise to be coincidental. Legal analysts have cautiously described the situation as a disturbingly well-timed alignment of financial and medical decisions. What once seemed like a forgotten clause in a long-standing contract has now become the focal point of what some call reality television's quietest tragedy. For years, fans of American Pickers questioned Frank's sudden disappearance, why there was no farewell, no tribute, and no public acknowledgement of his contribution to the show. The truth that has now emerged is far darker than anyone imagined. According to months of estate records, medical files, and contract audits, Frank's decline was not just a matter of poor health, it was shaped by a system that prioritized financial outcomes over human dignity. Care was reportedly cut not because doctors had given up, but because financial administrators made the decision after reviewing the 24-month clause. His stroke in July 2022 started the clock. His death in September 2024 ended it, just in time to save the network from paying further royalties. Though no one has been charged and no court has ruled on the matter, the haunting question remains, was Frank Fritz managed to death? The numbers aligned. The care was stopped. And the silence, from the show, the industry, and those in charge, was deafening. Frank's legacy, once rooted in the thrill of discovery and storytelling, was reduced in the end to a line item on a financial ledger. His voice, once filled with curiosity and warmth, didn't fade simply due to illness, but, as some believe, because of a cold financial calculation. With this final revelation, the long-standing mystery surrounding his disappearance is